Hello, my name is Stuart. I'm the unrepentant atheist. Welcome to my channel. And today I'm going to be talking about fine tuning, which is typically used by Christians to argue for the existence of God. So I'd like to say straight away that I'm quite familiar with this argument, but there's quite a lot of literature on it, and I can't pretend that I've done a really thorough investigation. So you'll have to bear with me. A lot of you probably know a lot more about it than I do, and you could possibly reflect in your comments if you hear something that I have got wrong, but anyway, or if you can help me with to rebut it, because I uh, obviously I don't believe in God. I'm an atheist, and my first reaction when I heard this fine tuning argument is that it kind of it's like a mix between argument from incredulity and argument from ignorance. It's also sort of deferring one mystery onto another, like kicking the can down the road, as it were, and it just doesn't add up. But I appreciate you need to say more about it. So it struck me straight away when I heard about it that it's just not viable as a proof for the existence of God. So I think the argument goes that if the universe, if the parameters in the universe had been only slightly different, then we would be looking at a very different universe in which life would not be possible. So we've got gravity and we've got other forces which, if only they were 1 or 2% or even less different, then I've heard it said that the universe might just be one great big space of boiling hydrogen or something like that. That life would be completely impossible. So when I heard this, my first thought was, well, the universe is not really that well fine tuned to life, because as far as we know, life only exists on this planet, and we've observed what the conditions are like in space, and the vast majority of the universe. There's been a lot of speculation that there are other planets, of course, and that by the laws of probability, that one of all these thousands or maybe millions of planets, that other life forms will have evolved. Well, I suppose that's possible. You couldn't rule it out, but we of course only know about life on this planet, and as far as we know, space is an extremely dangerous place for life, and there's no reason to believe, from my point of view. I know there's the anthropic principle, and I'm not going to cover that because it's so complicated. That's something I'm going to look at another time. But it looks to me like, or rather, if we deduce that the conditions in the universe are so adverse to life, which you would have to say that is the case, because if the universe is billions and billions of years old, life has only emerged on this one planet, as far as we know, relatively recently. And it most likely has emerged possibly by a chance event, which eventually led to a biogenesis. More about that in a moment, of course. And what I'm saying is that had it not been for this chance event, we might not be here. And let's supposing that there is life on other planets, might just be bacteria, or they might just be, very, very primitive forms. Nothing at all which could observe the universe. And in effect, we would have all this space, all this vast universe with absolutely no life in it. And I don't find that impossible to believe. I can conceive of a universe which has got absolutely no life in it, which is just stars and planets, comets, asteroids whizzing around. Because we're looking at the universe after the fact. This chance event happened on Earth. Life got started. It evolved, and we're here to witness it all. but it might not have been the case. It might have just been a completely dead universe. And I can conceive of that being the case. It wasn't the case, of course. So it's a bit like this. I can't remember the name of the philosopher that proposed it, but this puddle that finds itself and looks around and says, "Wow, I've got this hole here. It's made just for me." It's looking at it after the fact, and it's kind of trying to reason backwards, and it just doesn't really justify the causation argument, you know. So the causation, the whole causation argument, which I suppose is sort of part of fine tuning, because obviously the argument is that God caused the universe to exist by fine tuning all the knobs. And that strikes me when we talk about fine tuning, we're always making analogies. We're making analogies. We've got the watchmaker argument. We've got fine tuning. We've got design. We're trying to apply analogies from our own human experience to something which is not that, which is the development and the birth of the universe. And I wonder whether these analogies that we're applying are really legitimate. So rather than trying to discover through observation and scientific method and analyzing data, we're going for these analogies and we're invoking, well, I'm not, but obviously theists are invoking a grand designer. And I wonder whether that's legitimate, because we're doing what we can with science to discover as much as possible about the circumstances which brought the universe into existence and life into existence. And we've made a lot of progress in the last few centuries and a hell of a lot of progress in the last 50 years. And if we would just wait and keep working on the science, eventually, hopefully, we may be able to unravel all the mysteries that we don't currently understand. Now, I watched a program on a Christian channel, because I don't just surf atheist channels and go, I'm not interested in echo chambers. Of course, I watch the Atheist Experience and that type of thing, but I'm also interested in looking at what Christians are doing in terms of not preaching, but justifying their views. And I do believe that if there was not such a significant atheist presence on YouTube and the internet, that we would not be seeing these Christian apologists inviting converted scientists onto their programs to explain why fine tuning is a virtual certainty. So I did watch one a few days ago. I can't remember what it was called, but there was a biochemist, a retired biochemist, who had become a Christian. He had a vision and he believed he was touched by the Holy Spirit, etc. He'd already had some misgivings about science, wondering how on earth it could be. He already saw elements of design in science, and so he was already sort of predisposed to thinking this way. And again, it seemed to me that his strongest argument, or at least he believed it was a strong argument, was the fine tuning argument on the expansion of the universe and the way it expanded. Again, that it was like, I don't know, 10 to the 400 or 100 to the 4,000 chance that the universe developed exactly in the way that it did, because if you changed even a little bit any of the parameters, then it wouldn't have developed this way. Now, one possibility is that with all the different parameters that there are, and science doesn't know this yet, or at least I don't believe it knows this, that when the expansion happened, it may have happened in such a way that, not that it was fine-tuned, but for various physical laws that we're not currently aware of, this is the only way that it could have expanded. And you would have to rule that out unjustifiably, in order to argue that there was a God and that he was fine-tuning the knobs to make sure that everything was perfectly coordinated. Other scientists have argued that what fine-tuning ignores is that if you change one parameter, it may well be that the relationship between all the parameters, in other words, gravity and all the other forces and events that happened, if you change gravity slightly, that all the other forces might also change, and that the universe may still look like this, or it may look different, but there still may be life forms, but a different life form that's not us. Because it's not that the universe is conducive to human life, it's that we had to make ourselves, or rather life had to evolve and develop through abiogenesis and evolution in the environment in which it found itself. So I somehow think that it's being looked at the wrong way. So life had to adapt in order to get going. There were trillions and trillions of chemical events in maybe trillions of different circumstances, atmospheric pressure, temperature, etc., that eventually, led to the formation of the building blocks of life, and this amazing event that we had a self-replicating cell. And this is one thing that the biochemist keeps coming back to, and saying that he can understand how some of the experiments that have been done have proven that, or rather have established that certain building blocks can be established, but he says he didn't see how we could get from that to a self-replicating cell. Now, I don't know either. I've got absolutely no idea, and I don't think anybody does. But you can't just suddenly say, well, yeah, because God did it. You can't just say that, because you're arguing from ignorance. We've got ahead of us hundreds, thousands of years to discover these things and work out how it happened. We've just really barely scratched the surface. So give science a chance to unravel these things and discover them. It may well be that in my lifetime, we may well actually resolve it. It's possible. But until then, I don't see any justification for invoking a God. And as I've said time and time again, that when you argue for design, when you argue for fine-tuning, you're violating Occam's razor, which says that you must not, that there's no need to introduce an extra entity when it's not necessary. You're introducing an extra entity, in other words, God, and a whole set of even greater problems, because if human life, now a human being is a lot less complicated than a God is, you'd have to agree with that. You're not going to tell me that God is simpler than a human being. No. An omnipotent, omnipresent God, all-knowing, must, I don't see how it could be a primitive form. It must be an extremely complex form. And if the argument is that a designer, I know we're getting onto intelligent design here, where I didn't really want to do, but it's a principle. If the argument is that it took an intelligent designer and it took fine-tuning to result in a universe fit for life and human life, if it took fine-tuning to do that, what kind of fine-tuning would have been needed to make a grand designer, to make a God? So you're just replacing one problem, mystery, with an even greater mystery. I don't see any justification for that. No matter how amazing or incredible or unlikely you may think, you may be baffled by it, that the universe and life is. It happened. You don't understand it. Science doesn't currently understand it. But you'd have to rule out that science will never understand it. And even if science never does understand it, if in 1,000 years' time they still haven't worked out everything that some of the problems I've discussed in this video, in my view, you've still got no justification saying that it was God, because there is a naturalistic explanation. There's no need to invoke a supernatural explanation, because you're just replacing one mystery about the natural universe that we know exists with a mystery related to a supernatural entity that we don't know if it exists. And then you've got to look at an infinite regress of causes. An infinite regress of causes. I don't see any justification for it. And I know it's complex. I know that thousands of pages have been written about it. And I know that Christians will still throw their arms up in the air and say, well, I don't buy that, because the odds, they start talking about the odds, the statistics, it's 10 billion to 1 against. I don't know how they calculate these these odds, and I don't know that it's legitimate. I know that Stephen Hawking has said various things, and we see, oddly enough, Christians citing Stephen Hawking, saying that it was 10 million to 1 against this happening or that happening. And it's odd that Stephen Hawking was never a theist. He was so impressed with these odds that he never took the leap to, or rather, not the leap. I don't call it a leap to theism. I call it a fall backwards, in my view. And none of the other scientists who are cited are theists. So I do reject it. I think that it is an argument from ignorance. It violates Occam's razor. It's kicking the can down the road. It's just you can't have an infinite regress of more complicated causes. You can't, because it will just go on forever. Our God was created by a greater God. That greater God was created by an even greater God. No. There's no need for all that. Look, I'm a methodological naturalist. I'm not a philosophical naturalist. I'm not ruling out that there is a God. I'm not ruling out that there are supernatural things. But until I see evidence, obviously, I won't believe in that. And I will be looking at what science can establish. And hopefully, in due course, these matters will be resolved. And at the moment, theists are just arguing from ignorance. The Christian biochemist was saying he's spoken to people who are working in abiogenesis. He's spoken to physicists, and he says they're getting dispirited. They're thinking of giving up in CERN because they haven't discovered as much as they'd hoped. Abiogenesis, they've made no progress in 50 years since the experiments in the 50s, and they're getting fed up. They're in despair because they're on the verge of converting into theists. Well, I don't know whether that's true or not, but even supposing it is true, it doesn't make any difference, because it's still an argument from ignorance, and it's still pointing to an infinite number of causations, which there's no need. There's absolutely no need for it. And as others have said, that there's no reason to believe that the universe hasn't always existed in one form or another. Whether there's an expansion and then a crunch, an expansion and a crunch, who knows? Who knows? We'll have to wait for science to unravel it all. Let's just see. I've made some notes here. I think I've kind of covered everything. And I admit that this is a limited presentation. It's really, I want to explore this in more detail, of course. Yeah, I've covered everything that I made notes on. Okay, guys, let me know what you think about that. And I'll be really interested in your comments, because this fine-tuning thing seems to be the big argument that most Christians are using, more so than intelligent design. So, in fact, to give him some credit, the biochemist who was talking believes in evolution. So obviously he rejects intelligent design. And actually, that's something else I'd like to get onto. If you're a Christian and you want to challenge me on evolution, no, don't do that. First, go and convince all your fellow Christians who accept evolution that intelligent design is more viable. Once you've convinced all them, then you can come to me as an atheist. If you can't convince fellow Christians that fine-tuning and intelligent design is viable, then you've got no right to expect that you can convince atheists. Okay, that's all for now. Look forward to seeing you again soon.